Apple has made some pretty big changes to the camera this year on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Even though the phone looks the same and definitely feels the same, the camera system has improved, which is really nice to see. On screen now are some of my favorite photos I've taken so far on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. All of these images were shot using the exact settings I'm about to walk you through, and they were also edited with my Lightroom presets for iPhone. So now you've seen what the iPhone 16 Pro and Pro Max's camera systems can do. By the way, they're exactly the same camera systems. Let's dive into the exact settings that you need to change to make sure your phone is taking the best looking photos possible. All right, so here we are inside of the settings for your iPhone, and what you want to do is make your way down to the camera section right here. Now we're going to dive into system settings first because I've got to kind of be honest with you. I really hate the new button on the side of the new iPhones. It gets in the way, in my opinion. I always find myself pressing it by accident, whether I'm holding my phone vertically trying to take a photo or a video, or I'm trying to watch something. It just gets in the way. I'm always pressing it, so I dialed this right back. So let's open up camera control. I'm first going to turn off clean preview, and then launch camera is now going to take a double click. I've single clicked that side button so many times already that I'm already fed up with it and want to get a case that just covers it. But unfortunately, that's not available just yet. But with that being said, this is not affecting image quality whatsoever. It's purely just a personal preference, whether you want to use the button on the side or you don't want to use the button on the side. I can still take photos with the camera button on the side of the phone when I'm in the camera app. It's just harder to make mistakes and for it to get in the way when I have these settings enabled. So back into the main section of our camera settings. Photographic styles, we're going to be shooting in ProRAW Max. Just a little bit of a spoiler. So photographic styles for us is out the window. I edit all of my photos inside of Lightroom Mobile, so photographic styles for me is not required whatsoever. I don't want to bake on any edits to my photos. I want to make sure I always have a raw copy and a copy that is the original photo, and then I've got my edited copy as well. So we're going to jump over photographic styles. And since this video is all about photos and image quality, not video, we're going to be diving over all of the video settings and straight into formats. Now, right here is where we're going to be making the biggest difference to our image quality by far. And I've got some very interesting things to run you through because Apple has made some pretty big changes to the file compression settings. So let's dive in. First things first, nothing's changed since last year. Camera capture, this is for when we're capturing non-RAW photos. I leave this on high efficiency. I find that the photo quality is better, and I can also use these photos pretty much everywhere I go as well. When I'm looking to upload them to Google Chrome, whether I need to send them on WhatsApp, whatever the case, I can send these photos, so I'm happy with that. I'm also going to leave photo mode on 24 megapixels. This megapixel count here is not referring to the ProRAW Max megapixel count. This megapixel count is referring to our photos that we're taking when we're not shooting in ProRAW Max. All right, making our way down into our ProRAW settings now. Of course, we want to make sure ProRAW and resolution control is turned on, and then we can dive into the settings. So let's start out up the top with ProRAW Max up to 48 megapixels selected. This is going to ensure we're taking the biggest photos possible. Super ideal. And now we're moving into one of the biggest and most important changes to the file formats, which is the new compression settings. So we've got three options here. We've got JPEG lossless, JPEG XL lossless, and JPEG XL lossy. Now, if you want the absolute biggest and best photos possible, choose JPEG lossless. Okay, go for it. It's not going to compress your image at all. This is great. However, in my opinion, and I'm going to put some examples on screen now, JPEG XL lossy is by far the best file type you can choose right now. The file sizes are significantly smaller, and I personally cannot see any difference between JPEG XL lossy and JPEG lossless. If you go ahead and decide to shoot with JPEG XL lossy turned on, not only will you be saving a load of storage space on your phone and on the iCloud, but you'll also be having a way easier time editing your photos because it's not going to be as heavy as a file. So your phone or your computer is going to have a way easier time editing these photos. I've also found that between JPEG lossy and JPEG lossless, there's pretty much no difference as to how they perform inside of an editing program like Lightroom. All right, so with that out of the way, video capture down the bottom, that is formats wrapped up. Now we can move on down to preserve settings. I pretty much recommend to turn everything on here aside from photographic style, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I don't use photographic style, so I don't want anything to do with photographic styles turned on. And what preserve settings is doing here is making sure that every time we leave the camera app, the camera settings are as we left them and they're not getting reset. So I'd recommend, it's just kind of good housekeeping to turn pretty much all of these on and you'll be good to go. All right, with that out of the way, we're pretty much wrapped up with all the camera settings, which is awesome. I'm just gonna come down to composition here. I'm gonna turn grid and level on to make sure I have a really good chance of absolutely nailing my composition. View outside of the frame is also turned on, happy with that. Photo capture, I've got the default lens set to 24mm. I do, however, have the 28mm and the 35mm lens enabled, but by default, it's set to 24mm. Apple calls this the Fusion camera, and more or less what you can do is tap on the 1x, and I'll show you how to do this in just a moment, but you tap on the 1x focal length when you're inside the camera app, and it somehow changes the focal length. However, it's not. In my opinion, it's just digitally zooming in, but Apple says there's some magic that happens, so do with that as you will. For me, I'm just shooting at 24mm, and if I want to shoot at anything more, I'm using the default focal lengths that are already set in the camera app. So with the Fusion camera out of the way, that is pretty much going to be wrapping up our settings. Aside from portraits in photo mode, if I want to shoot portraits, I'm going to just go into the portraits mode. So I've got that off. Prioritize faster shooting, also turn this off. What's going to happen here is if you're taking a load of photos on your phone really quickly, chances are you're going to notice things slow down a bit, but nothing will happen to the file size or the quality of your images. But if you turn on prioritize faster shooting, what's going to happen here is your phone is going to start compressing those images and taking less resolution shots as well. So that's not ideal. Lens correction, we want to turn that on. When you're shooting with like the ultra wide camera, things get a little bit warpy in the sides. I'm sure you might know what I'm talking about if you've played around with it before. So make sure you turn that on. That's going to correct those edges. And then macro control as well. I want to be able to make sure I can control when the macro is coming on and off. So this is definitely a non-negotiable. All right, so with all of the camera settings out of the way, I'm now gonna dive into the camera app and show you a handful of little tips and tricks to help you take even better photos, because you can have the perfect camera settings, but if you're not using your camera correctly, then you're probably not going to be taking the best looking photos. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to swipe down here and we're going to open up the camera app. Now, there are a handful of things I want to tick off here, but I'm going to run over the most important ones first. If you've never changed any of your camera settings before, chances are things might be looking a little bit different right now, but that's fine and that's good. So we're going to start up the top here with RAW Max, and you can see that there's no line through this. If I turn it off, now we're not shooting in Pro RAW Max. When I turn Pro RAW Max off, I'm shooting things like documents. I'm shooting things like my ID if I need to upload it to book a flight or something like that. So when I'm not shooting with the intention of either editing the photo, posting the photo, or just taking a serious photo, Pro RAW Max is turned off. And then I also pair that up with a small, very small exposure adjustment. So if we come up to the top left-hand corner, you can see for me, I've got the flash toggle right here. We're gonna leave that off. I've then got the night photo setting right here as well. We can turn that off and on. And then I've got this weird little bar here. If I tap on this weird little bar, this is the exposure setting. So let me just pick my phone up real quick. You can see if I move this to the left, things get darker, we're at -2 exposure. And if I move it all the way to the right, we're at +2 exposure and things get really bright. I find that iPhones tend to just overexpose images all the time. So what I always do is leave this at -0.3, and I find this just helps add a little bit more contrast into my shot, and I'm fine with that. So this is, by the way, one of the reasons that we turned on preserve settings, to make sure that every time we open the camera app, it's not reset to 0, but it's set to our custom setting of -0.3. All right, so with that out of the way, we can close that just by tapping on the little bar in the top right corner. I'm gonna turn Pro RAW Max back on, so I'm happy with that. And then the last thing I wanna run you through is your focal length. So I kind of already touched on this, but if we have a look here, we've got the 1x. If we tap the 1x, we can go to 28mm. And then if we tap 1x again, it'll take us to 35mm. Now, like I said, I don't use these because in my mind, it's just digitally zooming in. And if I want to just zoom in a little bit, I'll simply crop from my 48 megapixel photo that I'm getting And believe me, you're not going to notice a quality difference whatsoever. However, I do want to show you something that I see people do all of the time, and that's zoom in between the preset lenses. So let's say, for example, we have a look here. We can have a look at 5x, and I know this is just the base of my laptop. We have a look at 1x. We kind of want something in the middle. 2x isn't where we kind of want it to be. So maybe we want to be between 2x and 5x. So most people I see usually come in and be like, okay, 4.1x looks great. I'll take the photo, and there we go. But the problem with this is it's just cropping in on the 1x lens. This is not ideal. You do not want to find yourself in between the focal lengths, because all that is doing is digitally zooming in on your image and arguably just reducing the quality. If you want to somehow get in between the lenses, the best thing you can do is take your photo at either the 1, the 0.5, or the 5x. From time to time, I'll use the 2x lens, even though I know it's just doubling the 1x lens and digitally zooming in on that. So it is reducing the quality a little bit. But if you just shoot with the preset lenses, the lenses that you have on the back of your phone, that is going to ensure that you're getting optical quality. And then if you want to zoom in after that, you can simply just go ahead and crop, but you now have the freedom and flexibility. You didn't lock yourself in at shooting at times 4.1, for example, and now you can't zoom out whatsoever. So I'd highly recommend to only be using the preset focal lengths, as that is going to ensure you get the best photo quality possible. All right, so now with all the camera settings and the camera app usage out of the way, let's dive into Lightroom Mobile. I'm gonna walk you through exactly how I edit my photos on my phone to get some really nice results. By the way, Lightroom Mobile is completely free. There is a free version. You can also pay for it. You'll get more cloud storage and you'll get more professional features, if you will, and we're going to use some of them in this editing tutorial. However, you can get access to Lightroom Mobile for free. You just won't have access to absolutely everything. So if you're just getting into photography and if you're just getting into photo editing, I'd highly recommend to go and check it out. Lightroom hasn't paid me to talk about Lightroom in this video at all. It's just the photo editing app I've been using for years. So with that being said, I've got this photo here of Sydney Harbour. By the way, not a drone shot. I actually took this on my phone. This is the Sydney Opera House, and I recently took my dad for his 60th birthday on a helicopter tour of Sydney Harbour. It's arguably one of his favorite places in the world. So I thought, hey, why not? Happy 60th birthday, Dad. And I took my phone up here to take as many photos as possible, and this has got to be one of my favorites. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video about my Lightroom presets for iPhone. I'm gonna walk you through and kind of show you a quick little tutorial on how I would use them on this photo. But of course, I don't wanna just show you how to use presets and then be done with it, because if you don't wanna go and buy my presets, I still want you to be able to edit your photos. So just quickly, let's dive into the presets tab. I'm gonna come down here, bottom left-hand corner, and then my WhatsApp ones right here where they start. These are all my iPhone ones. So we can just tap through here and check out what these presets are doing. Like I said, these are designed for iPhone photos specifically. So diving in here, having a look. Ooh, definitely a big fan of this one. So just quickly, how I would edit this photo. Let's say I'm gonna tick that box there. I'm gonna apply the preset. I'm then gonna come into maybe effects, drop the vignette on this photo a little bit, look at dropping maybe the clarity to take off that sharpness, just a touch, maybe the texture as well. Come into color. Let's have a look and see what we can do here. Maybe into grading, maybe highlights, put some blue in there. Maybe it's a little bit too much. Maybe not actually. I think that actually looks quite cool. You can tap and hold on any photo, by the way, to see it before and after. And just like that, the photo's edited. I like this color palette. I think it looks great. But like I said, I don't want to just show you exactly how you can edit with presets, as that wouldn't be helpful to absolutely everyone. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna reset everything, and now we're gonna dive into this photo and edit it from scratch. First things first, I find a lot of iPhone photos have a lot of yellow in them. Even though the Opera House is more or less completely white, it's not 100% nailing the white balance, and it's giving a little bit of a yellow cast, especially in this part of the Opera House. So let's tap on here. I'm gonna come into color mix, down to yellows, and then back these off quite a lot. And now things look really clean and really white, which is awesome. I'm then going to look at this section of my image over here, as it's looking a little bit washed and faded out. That should be under the orange section. So if I just crank this up, you can see we definitely get a nice increase over there. Really want to be bringing this image to life, especially because we have beautiful contrasting colors in the blues in the water, the oranges in the little walkway just here. And then of course, we've also got that white, that really rich white in the Opera House. So we're increasing the saturation quite considerably, and we're also making the oranges a little bit more red. red. I'm gonna come back into the yellows here and increase the luminance of the yellows, and that's gonna increase the brightness of the yellows in our shot. And then I'm gonna come over to our greens. We're gonna see if there are any greens in that water up there. Not really, but just for good measure, I'm gonna turn the greens a little bit more blue. Diving into the aquas now, we can do the same thing. Okay, the aquas are definitely controlling that water. So I'm gonna make them a little bit more blue as well, increase the saturation, and then look at the luminance. We might increase the luminance ever so slightly. Come over to the blues, look at increasing that or decreasing that. It's actually really just affecting the bottom part of our opera house here. So what I'm gonna do is decrease the blues just like that, but I'm gonna increase the luminance of them. Happy with that. A quick before and after, things are looking pretty good. Now let's dive into light real quick. I'm gonna open up the tone curve and just add a quick S curve to add a little bit more contrast, raise the blacks in the bottom left-hand corner. By the way, if you think I'm speeding through this, which I probably am, I've got a load of Lightroom, different tutorials and videos that you can go and check out over on my channel. So just keep that in mind. If you want a little bit more of a personalized breakdown and something a little bit slower, and if you're just getting started with photo editing, I might be rushing through this, but either way, let's continue. I'm happy with how the tone curve is looking. We're now going to come into effects. We're going to drop the clarity and texture. As I said before, I want to take off that digital edge. And now I'm going to open up the masking tab. I do believe this is a paid feature. I'm going to open up the radial gradient, get a whole radial gradient over our shot. Actually, let's do the light first. The light is coming from the top left-hand corner, I should say. So I'm just going to increase the exposure on that ever so slightly, hit the tick, open up the masking tab again. This time we're drawing a radial gradient over the entire shot. We're going to invert it by tapping the left-hand corner. And now I'm just going to drop the exposure ever so slightly. And just like that, we've taken our photo from this to this. And I think this definitely does not look like it was shot on an iPhone. This was, in my opinion, looks something like it was shot on a much more expensive camera. But anyway, that is gonna wrap up today's video. If you're new around here, a subscribe would mean the absolute world. Press the like button down below. And if you are getting into Lightroom photography and you wanna speed up your editing workflow, check out my Lightroom presets for iPhone. And guess what? I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.